Hello there. Today we're going to be talking about the chilling effect of shut up and dribble attitudes. Kind of a little bit of a continuation from the initial conversation about people basically telling folks to not use their voice to speak up and what that looks like in today's world. And I was just like, you know what? I think that conversation still has some more meat on the bone. So we're going to keep talking about it. And in the terms of let's talk about what really matters about the shut up and dribble mindset, what's running in the background and how that's going to affect us in the long term. So my name is Patricia, glad to have you here, where we're discussing all things leadership, leadership development, um, self-care, relationship building, and yes, advocacy and empowerment, because those are things I have always believed in and supported. And here's the thing: when we get to this whole shut up and dribble mindset, for those of you who are not familiar with it, there was a basketball player who started to get, vocal about some of the things that were going on in the country and uh, voicing a little bit of their political views. And basically was told literally to shut up and dribble. Like, no one's interested in hearing what you have to say about the politics of the day. Just go play basketball, and that's what we want you to do. And here's the thing: there is, besides the just rampant um, audacity of that, right? The insulting part, the arrogance of it, the disrespect of it. There's this whole other facet of that I wanted to explore. And that's that piece of what's the effect on people in their everyday lives when they are told to shut up and go do whatever it is you normally do, or they hear of someone who has been told to shut up and just focus on what it is that you do. So here's a scenario. Let's say you got person A who's expressing their opinion and belief on an issue, and person B, this is how it normally goes, makes some comment about that's not professional, that's not relevant, that really doesn't matter, and you just need to be quiet and focus on what it is you're supposed to be talking about, in their opinion, and not this other stuff. And so often, we hear of the people who respond and, you know, as I described previously, they have some pretty colorful words and ways of telling people to mind your own business. And no, I'm not going to do that. But here's the thing: what about the person A who does go silent, who is negatively impacted, and not just online or in a conversation, but throughout their life? That's what we're going to talk about today. So when this person goes quiet in their office, when they go quiet in their community, or if they go quiet even in their own homes and personal life with family and friends. So here's a couple examples of what it could look like, right? So let's say that, you've got someone's a meeting at work, and they hear, as we often do, someone misspeak, they misquote someone, they give incomplete answers, or sometimes just flat out the wrong answer. Person A knows that it's incorrect, but they don't speak up to say anything. And so as a result of that, whatever project, conversation, all of that continues down this incorrect path until it's caught at some later point by someone, something, some action. And all of that work and time has been lost because person A had felt muted and not able to speak up. Now, mind you, not because someone said anything in this particular meeting, but because someone told them that sometime before in another situation, right? Another example. Let's say it's in the community where someone, misrepresents a position or statement, but they're not corrected because of their quote stature in the community, or they're an elder and you don't get to, quote, talk back or disrespect them by disagreeing. These are real things, y'all. These are real things that happen. So, as a matter of course, things just continue down that path, that organization, that group, that issue. The support for it can dissipate because someone didn't speak up, because there have been attempts to mute them before. So they're like, well, you know what? I'm not going to say anything. And as a result, the support for that cause, that issue dissipates because no one's going to say anything to counter that person. They're just not going to engage. Third example, at home or in the personal life, where person A is being told that, oh, you're too sensitive. You really shouldn't be trying to say that. It's not really that big a deal. Or maybe they're being talked over in mixed company. That happens a lot, and it happens a lot with women in particular, right? Just being talked over by someone. Well, what happens when the person then is having to deal with an issue, a legitimate issue with their child at home, excuse me, at school, or with a friend in a conversation, or maybe at a doctor's office, and they just decide, you know what, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to ask any more questions. Just going to, keep the peace. These are all very legitimate situations and so many more of what the consequences can be of someone who's decided that, well, I don't want to hear what you have to say. Not just I don't want to hear what you have to say, I don't think it's even worth hearing you say. So you just need to be quiet and go do what you're supposed to be doing. So many things with that. So many things of that. But here's the thing that I want you to remember, that the shut up and dribble mindset, statements, whatever, they're really the words of a bully. And not just any old bully, a very insecure bully who has doesn't have the capacity or the ability to stretch their brains a little bit to hear what someone else has to say, or to acknowledge that there might be value in that. So their solution, instead of them being quiet, is to tell the other person, you need to be quiet. I don't want to hear that. It doesn't need to be said. And let's move along. I've seen this play out in real time and in real situations. I've experienced them, I've been a part of them. It is not pretty at all. It's just not. And it's so disrespectful. And it gets to that point where you have to question whether, not just about speaking up for yourself, but speaking up for someone else, which is a whole other conversation, right? When there comes a need to speak up on the behalf of someone else who's being disrespected like that, and whether there's some social obligation to do that, not because you're trying to agree with whatever's been said, but just the idea and the context of, wait, we need to hear what this person says. You don't get to dictate how they use their voice. That's really what the bullying part of it is. You're that person trying to dictate how someone uses their voice, especially if it's something that they think that they don't agree with. So I have three points to be made about encounter to those very similar situations, right? Whether it's at work, in the community, in your personal life. And I told you I've got stories for days. The first point I want to make is that, you know, the question is, how do you respond when you're being the subject of a verbal bully? You're being told these things. And I want to make sure that each and every one of you know that you are empowered to speak up on your own behalf and to reject that attempt to mute you. Doesn't require a huge confrontation, a lot of words, none of that. It can literally just be like, disagree, and I'm going to say what I need to say, right? So that's it. Three different things that come up in the context of it. For me, the first one is that you can be sure to state your truth and stand in your power in that moment and in the moments to come, right? Because sometimes you don't recognize how something has impacted you until later, until something else happens and you're feeling kind of triggered and you're like, that's where that came from. And so that's going to require you to be aware and engage in some reflection time, have some conversation with folks to make sure to deal with it long term. But what does this look like in real time? So, in real time, I will never forget this, y'all. I was at a very high level meeting. I was in an executive level position at a university system, and I was basically the lead person for this area. What was it? And I was attending a meeting of other executives in the same field and area for their universities, university systems, and all of that. And we were discussing some issue or matter. I don't remember exactly what it was now because it's not even important at this point. And people were voicing their opinions based on their boss's take or their university's take. And there was something that was being voiced that I did not agree with, and I knew that my boss would not buy into. And so I said so. I said, I voiced my opinion. I voiced our position, what it would be, more than likely. And to my shock and dismay, and the shock and dismay of most people in the room, one of the men, older white man from another system, literally verbally attacked me for making the statement and tried to belittle what I was offering. And I remember distinctly the room going quiet because I think everyone, they were in shock that this was this person's response. And because it wasn't just a disagreement, it was personal. And I took it personally. And I made sure to just say, well, you're entitled to say what you want, but I'm telling you what I know for my own behalf. Now I know why this person took this stance, and here's the reason why. I was the only female lead. There were other women in the room, but they were not the lead for their organization. They were not the voice for their organization. I was the voice for my organization in that room by myself as a Black woman with the same title as this person who voiced their ignorance and several others in the room who were all men. And dare I say, I might check, white men. There were other, like I said, women or a few other folks in the room, but I was the only female and person of color in the lead position who had the authority to speak on behalf of their boss. And it was not received well by this person. The others were fine. And things went along. And how I knew later that it wasn't, and it was shocked because there were people came up to me afterwards, kind of, oh, hey, check in on me. And two of them who were not normally, two of the other women, different organizations, who were not normally so friendly to me, even they came up to kind of do a quick check in post meeting. This one I knew, everyone in the room knew it was out of line. I do not know to this day whether anyone ever went and said anything to this person offline. Don't really care. But I knew that I had the ability to stand up for what I was there to do, and I did it. You don't get, others do not get to diminish your authority and your power in a moment simply because they don't like the package it comes in, they don't like the words that are being said. Like, that's not how it works. Can you disagree? Absolutely. But even in your disagreement, be respectful, be mindful, because there are other people who are going to be there, who are going to observe this behavior. And, karma, there's a little phrase about that. So that's that first one. You know, make sure that you state your truth and stand in your power in that moment and keep it moving. Doesn't have to be long and drawn out. I encourage you not to get into some, uh, ongoing words, because sometimes those folks don't know how to be quiet and they will just keep going. Not even worth your energy. Save your energy. Keep it moving. The second, the second point or observation I would say when faced with a situation like this is to state the truth, right, and follow with action. So in this situation, I'm thinking about from a community standpoint, right? There was a board that I was on. I've been on lots and lots of boards. So there's so many situations I could think of. But this particular situation, I'm thinking about where the leader of the board, so not the staff, but there was a leader on the board who was literally undermining some of the activity that we were trying to do in the course of making a decision about how to approach something from a governance perspective, and solely because she wanted to manipulate the outcome. She had decided the decision needed to be this way, and any questions about how to do it a different way, she literally, well, she was, well, we can just do this, so there's no need to have these other conversations. So I continued to ask the questions, to provide my input, to offer my skill set, my services to make it happen. But it came to a point in time where it was very clear that this person had taken steps to completely undermine the work that we were doing, and to the point that there were contacts that needed to be made that weren't being responsive, and unbeknownst to us, it's because this person had taken some action. And so when we got to back to a point and got to move forward, I still made sure to voice my uh, perspective on it from a procedural and process standpoint. I made sure that the others involved were aware of all the opportunities, all the choices. And ultimately, we did end up at a result and a decision that worked for the organization that happened to align with the position of the leader, but not because of the way she went about it, right? But because I continued to ask the questions, continued to state facts that were related to it and approaches, and it was messy getting there, but ultimately the right decision was made because a process was engaged, not because it was undermined in a conversation. The action piece of that was not just me continuing to force the conversation and ask the questions. The action piece of that for me was stepping away and resigning from the board immediately thereafter, which was not expected. And that is because I needed, I felt like, well, clearly my commitment has been honored at this point, and my services are no longer needed. And my work is done. Not the way I would have preferred for that to happen. However, after years of service on various types of boards all across the city, the state, and the country, I learned, I knew it was like there's no coming back from that, right? And so that's the reminder that you can state the truth, follow up with it, honor it, and still take actions that are aligned with who and where you are as a leader, right? My third example is where I say taking that, and it feeds off of this last one as well, which is to honor your truth and move with integrity with everything that you do. And in those moments where you're being told to shut up, where your voice is being minimized. So the situation that this arose in was not even one where I was headed to. I was thinking of something else. And then this just popped in. I was like, wow, I don't think I realized it at that point, but it's because it was so much more covert. I mean, so much more covert. I said that right. So sometimes the quote bully move is less overt. And this situation that I'm thinking of is where, you have a friend that calls you all excited about some new opportunity. And it's like, yes, this sounds great. Um, and they're like, yeah, but hey, so I made sure to tell him that you and I were working on this together. Like, cool, no problem. And, but I kind of said this thing here, which ended up being a misstatement of the truth. And so if they call you, just make sure you agree with that or that you support that. To which I could not do. I was like, yeah, for a number of reasons, I could not, because it would have required me to take actions contrary to my beliefs that would have brought my own integrity into question should the actual truth come out. And quite frankly, uh, bring some damage to my personal reputation and how I handle things. Because, I'm sure they were viewing it as, well, what's a little white lie for a friend? I was like, well, it's actually more than that because my reputation is on the line long after the little white lie is told. And I say that, and you might say, well, how is that a be quiet, thing? Well, because it literally was, hey, I've already taken this action, so you just need to not contradict me. In other words, don't speak up. Don't speak up. Don't tell the truth. Don't lie, but just don't tell the truth and just go along with this. It's the same effect. Shut up, be quiet, and then just let this happen, right? Slightly different scenario, fact scenario, same result. And in that case, I had to tell the friend, that's not going to happen. Not going to be able to do it because it's that whole scenario of once you start down the road telling one lie, you got to tell another one. And for this situation, bringing in a third party who I did not know, I'm not going to be lying to a third party and then end up having my reputation be in danger because of this. So I made sure to let them know I would not be doing it. Do not send them my way, and make sure that my name does not get brought up into that later. Now, three different scenarios, same results, same mindset, I should say, pushing it forward, but the results being different than what we discussed earlier about how it could mute someone's ability to speak up. The bottom line is we all have agency and the capacity and the ability to use our voice. Hopefully, we're using it for good and for standing up for the things that we believe in. And even if we're wrong, it doesn't give someone else the authority or the ability to literally mute you and tell you not only should you shut up, but you should just shut up and keep doing what I think you should be doing instead. Because that is really, I mean, when you just think about the audacity of that. And unfortunately, so many of us, where that comes into play, um, I mean, there's so many more places we could go with this. I'm not going to. There's not enough time. Um, but it's women who are the recipient of that. Not always, but most of the time. But the interesting factor is it's not just men who are saying this to women, but there are other women who will tell women this. That's always fascinating to me because I'm like, well, girl, what you gonna do when somebody come along your way and you're gonna need some support in that meeting?